if only those idiots in the Pentagon had followed the brilliant plan that was developed by the Department of State. I'm sorry, that's me talking. Doug doesn't speak that way. And this is Doug speaking now. Numerous news articles and books have presented a distorted history of the future of the Iraq project, claiming that it produced a plan for administering post-war Iraq, and that the Pentagon civilian leaders, who were supposedly hostile to the project for ideological and bureaucratic reasons, ordered Jay Garner, the head of ORHA, and ORHA to ignore it. John Kerry used that story in the 2004 presidential debates, and it eventually became so well established a piece of conventional wisdom that journalists and members of Congress could invoke it without feeling obliged to cite sources or seek confirmation. The fact is, however, that we did end up with an occupation authority for a full 9 months, and I'm afraid that the label occupation sticks to us even to this day, although the occupation ended in June of 2004. Doug considers that the biggest mistake we made. To quote from his book, the chief mistake, he says, was maintaining an occupation government in Iraq for over a year, even though the dangers of occupation had been recognized throughout the Bush administration, and even though the president's policy had called for the early creation of an Iraqi interim authority. The central task of liberation was to bring about political transition in Iraq, he says, but this was impeded beginning months before Saddam's overthrow by self-induced anxieties at state and CIA about the presumed lack of legitimacy of the Iraqi opposition. He says the protracted occupation did strategic, long-lasting harm. It helped the insurgents win popular support. It seemed to confirm their incendiary propaganda about American domination and exploitation. It demoralized and damaged the standing of the Iraqi democratic opposition, the very people to whom we eventually handed the government. And it turned all the domestic, social, political, and other problems of Iraq into American problems. I largely agree with that, although if you ask me about, there's always this effort to find, well, what were the mistakes? I wish there were an equal effort to find out all the things that went right. Truth of the matter is that while I think without any question this has been a more costly and difficult war than anyone I know anticipated, it's also true that we all anticipated a much more difficult and costly initial phase of the war. And a great deal of the planning was in fact directed for that phase because that was where it was thought that the main danger lay. I think if you were looking for maybe even more important than the question of the occupation was something where I think no one got it right. As Doug does write, what was not anticipated by any office as far as I know was the Iraqi regime's ability to conduct a sustained campaign against coalition forces after it was overthrown. When the CIA in August 2002 analyzed how Saddam might attack, surprise, or otherwise foil us in a war, its analysis dealt only with actions Saddam might take while still in power. I never saw, Doug says, and I never saw either, a CIA assessment that the Baathists after their ouster would be able to organize, recruit for, finance, supply, command and control an insurgency, let alone an alliance with foreign jihadists. I do think that is why this war has been so much more difficult than anyone anticipated.